Welcome back to Your 1230, the only podcast where our guests tell their story with the help of 12 questions in just 30 minutes. I'm your host, Mike Salitro, and we are thrilled to be joined by Lauren St. George. Lauren is South African by birth, an American by choice, and a global explorer by design. Great line. These life experiences have fostered her appreciation for the diversity of people's ideas, motivations, strengths, and dreams. She is a coach and a consultant. Lauren has worked with everyone from individuals to nonprofits, from startups to Fortune 500s across most industries, geographies, and products and services. Lauren's experiences help to bring multiple perspective to all of her clients. Lauren, welcome. We are really excited to be speaking with you.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And I want to ask you there, your bio mentions a background in both coaching and consulting. How do you separate the two, or what is the difference for you, and how do you explain it to your clients?
I, those are the best two terms that I can use for people to understand what I do. I actually would prefer to call myself a change facilitator because I really work with companies and individuals to really figure out how to make big changes happen in their lives. But I think the differentiation, at least in my mind, is that consulting tends to work. Or tends to be used within the business world, whereas coaching is more on a one-to-one individual basis. Um, so that's why I use those two terms. But really, I'd love to call myself a change facilitator, but I think most people wouldn't understand what that means.
Well, when you said it, I understand is one thing. The other thing I think it might terrify people because I feel like change is one thing that will bring up resistance in general. And then when you throw a facilitation or facilitator next to it, it's like, whoa, we need to slow down here because I'm not ready for that. So that's what I thought of would be a roadblock. But that I think that might explain what you do most directly. Having a wide array or clients from all types of backgrounds, how have you found that you've kind of can identify what helps them change most quickly? Because I'm sure it's different depending on the setting. But how do you help them identify here's where we are, here's where we want to go, and here's how I can help you get there?
Well, just in what you said, I think actually foundationally, the methods that I use, which are rooted in creative problem solving and design thinking, largely follow a very similar thought process because they're based on our natural ways that we solve problems. And so I think it does, whether you're working with a business or an individual, it is about really visioning what does that future look like, and really deciding, well, are we talking 1, 3, 5, 10 years down the road? And then stepping back and going, now that we know what that future looks like, where we'd like to get to, um, let's look at those roadblocks that are preventing us from getting there. Let's come up with solutions as to how we're going to overcome those and put a plan in place to make it happen. And I think that once you go through that process and you have that plan, I think it can be easier for individuals and businesses to accept the change that needs to happen because it feels like they've been along for the journey, they've bought into the outcome of the solution, and then now have a step-by-step process to make it happen.
I think you hit on a lot of big things that are important there. The one, having a system or a process to follow in general, but understanding that you've got to tailor it to who you're working with. And the really underrated piece that you mentioned is the bring them along for that journey. That if you can get that buy-in with somebody that you're working with, whatever collaboration level it is, that we're in this together, we're in this boat together, we have our outcomes tied together. That it will make a difference as you progress through that journey or that process together. How are you able, whether it's talking about past successes or relating it to their situation, how have you been able to keep this metaphor going? Have people jump in the boat with you?
I think it's about the foundation of everything I do is creativity, and it's helping to solve those big challenges with new and novel ideas. But to get people to jump in the boat, I think they have to feel like they're part of the process and that they're co-creating with you. So I honestly believe that one of the fundamental principles to creativity and problem solving is to co-create that solution together. And so I think when you, as a business especially, are bringing the right people into the room, you're asking the right questions, and you're going through that process together. You're getting the buy-in, you're getting alignment, and that helps then lead to kind of the change management that you then have to go through in order to roll it out to the rest of the company.
So as you describe this, this is working through challenging situations, problems, opportunities, whatever you like to call them, with your clients, with your collaborators. So not necessarily easy work, kind of difficult or heavy lifting. How did you figure out that you were good at this and this is what you wanted to do?
That's a great question. I think it's become a culmination of my history to this point. I started off in marketing and branding, had a creative agency for a number of years, and then we found a good niche working with innovation teams within the companies that were our clients, and helping to bring ideas to life. There was one particular group within Coca-Cola that were tasked with doing a very similar process, and we were helping to kind of sell it within the company, and it really piqued my interest, and that led me to do my master's degree. So it's been a journey, but I think throughout the sort of the three things that have been constant for me have been um, really storytelling and learning how to package things up well, asking great questions and deep listening. And I think that certainly the asking great questions and deep listening are, again, I think, principles to creativity, but they've been a part of my career up until now, and I think that it's something I do well because I've done it most of my career. I find people telling me things in shopping malls and elevators, and so there's something about me that helps people, I think, feel safe and share. So it's kind of led to where I am.
I love that answer. And I want to follow up on a couple different things. I'm going to do my best to follow up on each of them. But I want to start with the storytelling part. What makes a great story, or how can we tell better stories?
We can tell better stories by understanding who our audience is. Oftentimes, I think, again, especially in the business world, we tend to companies tend to come in and go, "This is what we can do for you. Here are all the bells and whistles. Buy this product." But I think if you step back and you really look at who's our audience, what are their pain points, what kind of solutions are they looking for, and we tell the story from that perspective, we're already telling a much better story. So I think that would be, again, the thing that I would root everything in is who's the audience, and what kind of story that do they need to hear.
And that makes sense. And that ties to the second piece I wanted to ask you about the being able to identify and ask great questions. And I think that goes hand in hand with being able to listen and figure out what makes sense to follow up on or follow up with. Um, how do you have you always been a good listener to ask good questions? Is it something that you've developed? And well, again, how can people get better at this? Because I found that this is something that can be really difficult for some, or in some audiences, that it's yes, but I've got this great thing I just need to say. So I hear you talking, but let me just go because this is way better.
So I think it started for me with my mom when I was a kid. Used to play these lateral thinking games with me. There's a ton of them online now that you can find. That she would ask me these tell me these stories that I then had to sort of solve what the problem was, and they're fun little stories, and it would require me to ask questions to get a yes or no answer. But it would when I first started, it would take weeks for me to solve this problem, and I was little at the time, and I got better and better over time. I think good questions are something that you do have to focus on, spend time, practicing. It's a muscle. So for me, it started at a young age, and then it's just been a part of my career throughout, and certainly now in the consulting and coaching side of things, it's all I do, because I believe that inherently that the answers are within the people that are in the room, but you've got to ask the right questions to unlock those. And then, like you said, the deep listening side of things, which is really about showing up with the intent to actually understand what the other person is saying, and being present to hear the answer, and not spending time thinking about what's the next question I'm going to ask. And that again is something that takes practice and a genuine interest in what the answer is.
I think that's it, is that you generally being interested in what the person is talking about for the reason to understand and build up and off of what they're saying is really the key there. And I'm going to ask because you mentioned playing the games as a little kid. with weeks going by between the beginning and end. So anything that keeps a child's attention for that long, I need to know, because I have small children, and anything I can do to keep their attention more than 20 minutes really helps. So do you remember any of these stories, or is there anything that you can think
Sure.
of? Could you
I can
share one?
I can share one. Okay, so a man walks into a bar. He asks for a seagull sandwich. The bartender hands him a seagull sandwich. He takes one bite of it, goes home, and unfortunately takes his life. And the question is why? They're not cut and dry answers, and they're designed that way to really get you to ask a lot of questions. So, but yeah, my mom would ask me those, and then they would drive me nuts for weeks.
Okay. Do you remember the answer to that one, or what the reason was behind it?
The answer to that one was that the man had been shipwrecked on an island, and they had his friends had been telling him that he was eating seagull sandwiches. When he went and actually ate a seagull sandwich, he realized that in fact they were eating the people on the island to survive. So
Okay.
unfortunately, that's a dark one that just came to mind. Some of them did tend to be dark.
I am not very judgmental, but with the age of my children, I think I'm going to skip that one for now. Maybe something we work toward, but
I would look up I'd look up lateral thinking stories or lateral thinking puzzles online, and I'm sure you could come up with something of a little more PC.
We can do that. Switching gears, though, I really was taken by your bio because it highlighted using your experience with in different settings, different groups, kind of both geographically and type of professional work, to appreciate where ideas are coming from, who may be contributing them, and really appreciating diversity and the willingness that sometimes good answers come from all different places, and that you really have to just kind of be open to that. Is that something that you have also cultivated from a young age, or how are you able to appreciate that? Even though this person is different than me, thinks a different way, they might have a really solid answer, even if it's something that I never would have come up with if I spent 10 years thinking about it.
I mean, certainly for myself, growing up in another country, moving at a relatively young age, I was 14 when we moved, and then travel has helped in that. But on the business side, there's certainly diversity within when we run workshops. Diversity, I think, is key, and we really strive to make sure that everyone in the room is heard. And in fact, we'd rather, we certainly want to make sure that the most junior people in the room have an equal voice to the most senior people in the room. And so that takes setting up some sort of guidelines at the beginning. It takes being very thoughtful in how you design a workshop to make sure that there are times where people are speaking, there's times when they're writing down ideas, that you're capturing thoughts and ideas in different ways, that you're doing smaller breakouts so people feel safer to talk in a smaller group. So we use a whole bunch of tools to make sure that we're evening the playing field for everyone and making sure that everyone is heard, because you don't know where good ideas are going to come from. And everyone comes in with their own experiences and thoughts to bring to the table, and they should all be just as valid.
I like that answer a lot, and I want to ask about the level playing field and kind of presenting when you're working with the client, especially maybe bigger an organization where there are those junior and senior people, might be in that same group that you're working with, presenting to. How are you able to kind of work with, and I don't want to say respect, but you'll get differing answers from different level folks, and you've got to navigate that carefully, because the group in your role, they're testing you. They want to see what your level of knowledge is, why you're there, how you can help them, and ultimately, how can you make this better for me, my group, my team, whatever it is. So when you have different levels of experience, tenure, of quality of work in the same group, how do you balance that to have that level playing field, to have everyone feel like they are heard, to have them contribute, and to kind of have everyone on a similar page moving forward?
Well, certainly we start, I think you need to start setting that up from the very first meeting. in terms of as you start to think about the participants and who are going to be in the room, is a point in time where I think it's the facilitator's role to really sort of call attention to. We want an equal mixture of uh, genders, of age, of ages, of different roles within the company, depending on what you're trying to solve. Of course, there's going to be different groups that are more appropriate than others. But I think it's on us as as the person who's running that workshop, who is consulting, is bringing in people into a room to have a discussion, to really make sure that you're trying to get the diversity in the room. Because I do believe that if you keep asking the same questions, you're going to get the same answers. And so if you if you keep having the same kinds of people mulling over a challenge, then you're not going to get that breakthrough thinking. So again, I think it's about making sure that you get the right people in the room. Then I think from the get-go, it's about setting some ground rules, which is we're here to hear everyone. Everything is valid. We want you to have more of a yes and mentality. We don't want to cut down ideas because someone saying no. It's the easiest way to make someone shut up and not come up with another idea for the rest of that meeting. So we really want to foster this kind of like build on each other's ideas. We can always rein an idea in. It's a lot harder to make it bigger. And then providing different ways to capture that. So even for the most sort of introverted person in the room, that there's ways that we're capturing the thinking, that we're making sure that they are heard in one way, shape, or form. And that's also because I think there's a diversity of people in terms of the way that they learn and like to express themselves. So not everyone wants to talk. So I think you've got a lot of visual learners who like to write things down. So it's about having a mixture of ways that you're gathering that information.
I think where you end there, that's a really excellent point. That there not only is the differing opinions and experiences, but there's the different ways that people learn. So having that mixture, having different ways to present maybe a similar idea or even the same information will be received by different people in that group a different way based on how they learn best or how they process information. So I think that's an excellent point. You mentioned, I think it was the prior question, coming to the United States as a teenager, 14-year-old. So I know that I'm sure that's a lot of new experiences. Is there anything that comes to mind? Either I had no idea this is what 14-year-olds in the US were doing, or it's like, oh, this is this is strange, or this is funny to me, or any kind of thing that pops in your mind that coming over at that interesting age.
American culture does have a way of working its way throughout the globe. So I was watching American movies and listening to music. Certainly, magazines showcased a lot of stars and celebrities and things. I think that for me, just the most challenging part of the first probably 6 months of moving to the US is everyone listened to the accent, which is not very thick anymore, but all they would listen to was my accent, and they weren't actually hearing what I was saying. So it was not we weren't having very good conversations, at least at first. And because of the accent and some of even some of the colloquialisms that we use in South Africa, there was a few conversations that really, went badly because no one actually understood what anyone was saying. But no, I don't think there was anything too glaringly different. I think just being 14 and moving anywhere can be difficult.
That's a good point. 14 is a difficult age, so that kind of change would be uh, a tough thing for anybody at the middle of high school. Um, One of the parts I skipped over, getting back to your professional background was, and we've talked a little bit about it today, was the idea of building partnerships, collaboration, or having kind of that buy-in from either a one-on-one client or a group. Sometimes that can be that can be difficult for many different reasons, and we talked about ways that having people feel heard, and then of course, getting people on the same page and working together. Has there ever been a time where it's been really difficult to get either a group or one person in a group to kind of see what would be best for the group, and kind of how you were able to kind of show them this is how we can do and this is best for everybody?
It's definitely, I think, when you're first starting out, and the group that I that I'm one of the leads in within Accenture, so a large consulting company. Um, when we first started out, we were, kind of a new function, and we had to win people over to really kind of understand what we did. So yeah, there's definitely, it's hard when you don't have a track record, right? When you've got examples, when you've got testimonials, when you've got case studies, when you've got those sorts of things, I think it's easier to win people over because you can show evidence that your process works. I think it's the hardest when you're first starting out with anything new, a new company, a new team, to win people over. And yeah, you're always going to have those naysayers, all those people that you're going to have to win over. And I think ultimately the way you do it is by providing the most value possible, convincing them to kind of take that journey with you, even if they're a little not, they're unsure of whether this is what they should be doing with their time. And then just making sure you blow them away with a great product. So, I think you're likely to, it's just going to happen, especially in bigger companies, that you're going to come across someone who's like, I'm not, it's a little skeptical about a new approach to doing things. As long as you can get the majority of people on board, they'll kind of begrudgingly come along. And I think that you've got to then show proof is in the pudding, and by having a really great product at the end, you'll make fans. And when you do make them as fans, they are they're die hard fans after that. And certainly we've managed to do that within Accenture.
Very nice. Very nice. But yes, you've earned it when you have the skeptical person come over when either at the finish line or toward the end there. So that's a good illustration. Your company is named What's Next. What does that mean, and where does that come from?
So what's next is more the coaching side of what I do, and it's working with individuals, and it really is taking the methodologies that I use in the business world and bringing them to individuals to really help them figure out what they want to do next in their life. So it's a pretty literal name for a company, but it is about really helping. Oftentimes, it's people who are feeling unsure of what they want to do, but they know that some change needs to happen, or they have a lot of ideas, have no idea where to start, or sometimes it's a fear of, there's more of a mindset piece to it, which you deal with less on the business side. But there is a mindset piece that is preventing them from taking that first step. And so, what's next is really looking to what's that next chapter. And oftentimes for people who are feeling stuck, it's getting them to a point where they'll do something. It might not even be 100% the right thing, but just by getting action, you'll get momentum, and then over time you'll be able to work your way to a place where you're feeling happy with the result. So that's where what's next comes from.
Well, that's a perfect name then. So I will ask, kind of in that mold, with taking the next step or figuring out where to go. Usually, the first step, or even if it's like I know what I want to do, I just don't know how to get there. Is there a way that A, if we know where we're going, B, what can we do what's the easiest way to start? Because I find that talking to people that you're gonna make your mistakes, you're gonna have to figure it out, change course, but it's getting started that can often be difficult, even if we know where we want to go or what we should be doing. Is there a way that you can suggest to our listeners of how to get started on that next thing?
It's a great question. I think two things come to mind. One is I think people need to really understand the what I call the sort of action motivation cycle, because there's sometimes when you have the motivation and it's really then easy to get into action. But when you have a need to do action, but you don't have motivation, is when you have to force yourself, right? It is easier to sit on the couch eating, chips and watching Netflix than getting up and going to the gym. We have to, at some point, have to force ourselves. And then the more you do that, motivation will come from that. So that, I think, is one side of it, is that there are some times where you just have to force yourself to do something. But I think in those times when you need to force yourself to do something, or even when you know what you want to do, I think the best place to start is by choosing your first step to be something that you can do in less than 2 minutes. Because what you want to do is you want to set yourself up for success. So if it is a simple thing that you can do within 2 minutes, you can check it off the list. You can feel good about it. You've done a first step. the next day, you'll do something that takes a little longer. So again, in that metaphor of that example of getting off the couch and going to the gym, your 2 minute thing might be finding your running shoes and getting those out. It could be Googling where the closest gym is and phoning to, get an appointment or sign up for membership. Whatever the 2 minute thing is to feel accomplished. And then as you do those small steps, the next piece of it is really celebrating the small wins. We get so focused on that big end goal that we oftentimes forget to keep track of the progress and celebrate the wins. And then we get to this point where we're like, oh, I don't feel like I've been making any progress, or I feel like I've fallen backwards, and I'm just going to give up. So I think the more we track things and measure things, and reward ourselves and celebrate along the way, again, you'll keep that motivation up and going.
I can't hit on all the things I love in that answer, but the two I definitely want to mention, the celebrating the small wins is super important because change is hard. Figuring out what's next is difficult. So if you just have that finish line or that this is where I want to be in 2, 5, 10 years, after some amount of time, you're going to feel beaten down or you're going to take a wrong turn. And if you haven't acknowledged that, hey, I've gotten somewhere, or I did something that's positive and I want to celebrate it, it makes it that much harder. And that's the second piece, that action motivation. I think that's a great way to think of it, that the motivation level is what fuels the action. The action will build your motivation and kind of work off each other. So it's get the ball rolling, and then once it's moving, it's a lot easier to keep it in motion. So love that answer.
Mhm.
Absolutely. As I look, we are somehow already at time. What's a question I didn't ask you tonight, Lauren, that I probably should have?
Oh, that's a good question. I think in all of this, um, the fear that we have of change really comes from a biological imperative. That's how our brains are built, and they're built to keep us safe. So because of that, and we're not necessarily being chased by woolly mammoths anymore, new ideas, the idea of change can be seen as something as threatening. And our brains are built to keep us safe, which means they like us on autopilot, they like predictable patterns, they like us to stay in our comfort zone. I really believe that understanding how your brain works becomes a tool that's going to help you to make the change or to reach the success that you're looking for. And so I think if I could leave people with anything, it's really recognizing that your brain is a tool and it can be used to get you to where you want to go. And so when things like that imposter syndrome or that naysayer in your head pops up and goes, "That's not a good idea," or "You're going to fail," it's just your brain trying to keep you safe and comfortable. And you need to have a way to counter that, some kind of a mantra, some kind of a response to it. And the more you do that, the quieter that voice is going to get in your head. So yeah, that would be sort of an area that I think is really interesting, and we could certainly have a much longer conversation about. But using your brain as a tool to get you to where you want to go.
That's awesome advice, especially the idea that that's the limiting factor. The imposter syndrome is in your mind, and you need to be able to identify and combat it, or else it's going to be almost an impossible obstacle to get past. So, excellent point. Where can our listeners find you? Where can they learn more if they'd like to?
My website is answerwhatsnext.com, and you can find me there. You can book a call with me. You can sign up for my weekly newsletter if you want some tools and inspiration on a weekly basis.
Excellent. So we will post that. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you.